Hey everybody, Tommy here, World at War Comics, and I have an amazing show for you. But before we get into that, please hit that subscribe button, like, share to all your friends. Make sure that they're watching this. I think you're going to really love this interview. All right, my next interview is with the veteran Ron Marz. He's been writing comics for 30 plus years. You know him from Green Lantern to Superman to Batman to Exo Man of War with Valiant. He's worked with Dark Horse. He's done it all. He's worked with almost everybody. Image Comics with Witchblade. He's just incredible. I love a lot of his work, and I was really honored to be able to have him on the show. Now, he has a brand new campaign, and it is for Shinku. Now, Shinku was a title that he created with Lee Moder about mid 2000s, like 2013, somewhere around there. They got through 5 issues. Things came up with the colorist and they had to put it on hold. Well, they always had the intent of getting back to this title, but unfortunately in 2023 we lost Lee. And so that was kind of the end of it. Well, 2 years later, Ron receives all of the artwork for the next 2 issues of Shinku, and now he is releasing it to fans for the very first time. So on Zoop, you could actually get a comics in one hardbound of Shinku, and you'll be able to see the last 2 issues that Lee had already did all the art for. And I cannot wait to get my hands on this. All right, without further ado, here is Ron and I hope you enjoy. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to World at War Comics. My next special guest is veteran, amazing creator and writer, Mr. Ron Marz. Ron, thank you so much for being with me today. Very excited to talk to you. I feel like I've been reading everything that you have done, not everything, but a lot of what you have done over the last, I don't know how many years, and it's really exciting to finally get to meet you. How are you today?
I'm good, and thanks for reading it. It kept me from getting a real job for a long time, so it's still working out pretty well. So you and everybody else help pay the mortgage. So I like how that arrangement has worked out.
Well, I'm happy for you. And, as a fan of comic books, it's always really exciting to be able to meet the folks that have been writing the stories that allow me to escape from everything I should probably be focusing on in my life. So I do appreciate that. Although I love it. I could tell you if my wife was sitting here, she'd probably be a little upset with you, as with all the other creators that I spend so much time in these fake worlds. But I absolutely love it, my friend.
Well, thanks. It's not really the career path that I set out on, but when that opportunity gets presented to you, you go, "Oh, yeah, I'd like to do that." And um, to a great extent, you don't get to usually stick around in comics this long. So I feel very fortunate and very blessed that I've been able to do it this long and that I'm still able to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I feel like you've touched just about every publisher that most comic fans are aware of. Obviously, the big two, even the big three, right? Images is quite big now, and they're doing a lot of really neat things too. So, but man, Dark Horse, you've done a lot of work. Valiant, outside of, I'm a big DC guy. I do love Marvel, don't get me wrong, but I'm a big DC guy, always have been. But Valiant is kind of another publisher that I really love. And Exo Man of War has always been near and dear to my heart. Robert Venditti was one of my favorite writers because of Exo, and I know you've written on Exo in the 90s. So, I mean, you've touched so much for fans. Can you kind of give us some insight on what it's like working with the big two and then working with smaller publishers in between, and how different is it, or is it kind of all the same to you?
I mean, the job is ultimately the same. The job, whether you're working for Marvel or DC, Dark Horse, Valiant, anybody in between, the job is ultimately make up stuff. I mean, the job does not change that much. The characters change, the editors change, but the job itself is still greatly the same thing that I started doing 30 years ago. So I don't find a lot of difference in working from place to place. Sometimes there are more editorial eyes on what you're doing. That's usual for the big two, and less on smaller publishers or certainly creator-owned stuff. But the method itself is kind of the same thing. I've been writing the same script format. I've been working in the same way for the entirety of my career because it seems like what I do has worked for me. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly. I think that's a good thing to live by for sure. Now, as far as storytelling, Ron, like where did this passion for storytelling start in your life? And was there anybody that you either looked up to or maybe encouraged you to go down that path growing up?
I read. I read as a kid. Read comic books as a little kid. Discovered a box of my older brother's cast aside comics in the basement. Sort of Marvel classic Silver Age books and other odds and ends, Tarzan, Magnus Robot Fighter. And I read books. I read prose. I read Tolkien and Robert E. Howard and Edgar Rice Burroughs. So um, I always had a craving for that kind of adventure, those kinds of stories. So I always wanted to be a writer. Once I figured out I probably wasn't going to play third base for the Mets, writer seemed like the next most obvious thing, and that my career path was sort of tended towards journalism. That was my first real job while I was still in comics, was a journalist for the local newspaper. But I ended up um, getting pulled into comics thanks to Jim Starlin and Bernie Wrightson, who were friends, lived in the same area, and Jim was the one who sort of took me by the hand and guided me into Marvel, showed me the ropes of script format. I found that already I could already think in pictures. I mean, that's really what this job is thinking in pictures and then describing it to an artist who then brings it to life and you put dialogue on top of it. Um, so um, I found that I could do it and it was fairly natural to me. I didn't realize that it was not a skill that everybody had. I just figured, well, that's the way my mind works. So surely everybody can do this. And as the years wore on, you start to realize, oh, this is actually a skill that is somehow inherent. It's one that I have, and not everybody else has, but they can develop it. And I found that I loved doing it. I loved the combination of words and pictures and collaborating with an artist, having the story that's in my head brought to life by someone incredibly talented. Um, that never gets old. Obviously it hasn't gotten old for me in 30 plus years because I'm still doing it. It's the best moment of this whole process is still setting the script off and then getting the art pages back as they start to trickle into your inbox. I just was texting with Danny Earls, who's drawing a story of mine for Savage Sword of Conan now that he's finished up his Hulk run, and it's still an exciting, like, oh, what is he going to do? How is it gonna look? So he said, I'll send you pages as we go. But that's still the best part of the process. That's still the thing that keeps you coming back to doing it this way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad you're doing some Savage Sword stuff. That's been really exciting. Will this be an issue 8 that's coming up,
I'm
or do you know?
actually not sure what issue it's going to be in.
Okay.
It's a story that I had written last year, in fact, and we
Oh,
we
okay.
just we just needed to wait for Danny for his schedule to open up because we had agreed that they asked me to. It's a Cormac McArt story. It was one of the sort of lesser known Howard heroes,
Hmm.
but one that I always liked, even when I was a kid. Um, so I said, here's some El Borak stories. So here's a number of different things, and they picked the ones that they wanted. And I suggested Danny for it because the character's Irish, Danny's Irish, and he's also really damn good. Um, so we just had to wait for the opportunity to get a hole in his schedule. So he literally texted me a couple hours ago saying, "All right, I'm started. We're going to do this." So that's exciting. Even after a couple thousand comics I've written and all these years, the anticipation of what is this going to look like is still just the coolest thing in the world.
What is it like? I mean, I think a lot of fans, right? We grew up reading comic books and reading stories. But the vast majority of us, although we dreamed of either being an artist or a comic book writer, it doesn't work out for all of us, obviously. But what is it like to grow up reading like a Robert E. Howard and then 30 something years later, here you are writing a story in Savage Sword? I mean, can you put that into words, like that feeling?
It's on the one hand, it's your job, right? That's what you do every day, and you do it long enough, it's sort of just like what you expect. But there are those moments like doing a Robert E. Howard story, writing Conan, writing Star Wars, which had a huge effect on my life as an 11-year-old kid. Um, there are those kind of pinch me moments that you still get, and hopefully, everybody in the business feels that way, because you don't ever want to get jaded to it. Um, the fact that I did a El Borak story, which is one, sort of a Robert E. Howard character that is kind of a proto Indiana Jones,
Hmm.
um, who was a character that I always, even as a kid, I thought was pretty cool. So I got a chance to do one of those stories, in Savage Sword 4. Mike Perkins drew it, and the story is nominated for a Robert E. Howard Award. So,
Amazing.
um, and I felt like, on the one hand, I think awards are stupid, right? Like I don't care about it because it's impossible to judge one thing against the other. But, if 12-year-old me who was carrying around Conan paperbacks in his backpack in middle school would learn that I'd get nominated for a Robert E. Howard Award years later, my head would have exploded. Um, Same thing with the 11-year-old me that was in the movie theater watching Star Wars, that I would get to write those characters. I would get to put words in Darth Vader's mouth. Again, my head would have exploded. So I think yes, it is your job, but you've got itches to scratch, and you've got boxes to tick off on these things that meant the world to you as a kid, and in many ways still mean the world to you. So, I hope I never lose the excitement of getting to play with those toys. It's I constantly remind myself how fortunate I am to have been able to do this as long as I've done it, and to play with the toys that I've had. I look back and go, because in many ways it feels like I just started doing it a few years ago, and I'm still learning what I'm doing, and I'm still trying to get better at it. But you look back over your career and go, oh, yeah, I did all that stuff. Um, and there are like 2,000 issues in the bibliography. So, um, you try to you, you try to stay, well, stay humble, certainly, but also you try to enjoy what is given to you, and enjoy the things you're able to do. Because I know how many people have always dreamed of being able to do something like this and never get the chance. So, I appreciate it when it happens.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. Now, I was watching another interview with you, and I can't remember what channel it was on, another podcast, and you were talking about Green Lantern, and that's kind of how we started. And a few fans were not happy with what you did with Hal Jordan, and then you had talked about death threats and how the NYPD had to visit some people. Like as a writer, and you're putting your stories out there, how do you divorce yourself from what maybe fans will like or will not like? Does that ever like enter in, or you have the story, you tell the story, and you move on to the next story type thing? Because
I've
that has to be a lot to manage, and I feel like today it's even maybe it's always been there, but I feel with Twitter and all these different social media, it feels like everybody's got a voice and everyone's very critical of everything everyone's doing, and I feel like that could be draining sometimes.
Yeah, the feedback is much more immediate now, right? If you were really pissed off about what I did on Green Lantern, you had to sit down and write a letter and put a stamp on it and send it to DC. Um, and in a few short years afterwards, you could go to a message board and bitch about it. But now it's instantaneous, and it's personal. Somebody can reach out to me on social media and say exactly what they thought, for good or ill or whatever. but it goes with the territory. It's part of the job, whether you want it to be or not. So, but like I said, I started at a daily newspaper. That was my job when I was, I think, 18 when I first started working at a newspaper as a sports reporter and then the entertainment editor. So I was a kid. I was still in college, and I learned very quickly that you were not going to please everybody. Somebody was going to be pissed off no matter what you did. So you really couldn't worry about it. I am very thankful that I had that mindset and that training from much older, much better journalists who had been doing this for years. And their reaction was kind of whatever. It's you move on to the next story. So I sort of had that armor in place when I got into comics. And I think that mindset was really valuable to me because not too long into my career, I was doing Green Lantern, and a lot of people were pissed off. And so when that happened, I wasn't terribly upset. I mean, I knew it was going to be controversial. We were going to get some blowback, and figured we'd get death threats, but we did get some of those. Uh, but it didn't matter to me personally. I didn't take it personally. I told the best story that I could tell.
Yeah.
I told the story that I was happy with, and I didn't get fired, so things had to be going okay.
Yeah.
So having that mindset helped me a lot, get through all that stuff. And you certainly get, no matter what you do,
Yeah.
somebody's unhappy with it. And I know there are any number of creators who are not really set up to deal with that, because it's a lot, and even though you're telling a story about some other character, um, it's still you. It's still you putting your creativity into that story, um, and somebody's going to tell you you suck. So you have to be able to divorce yourself from the reaction. I think for me anyway, for both good and ill, it's lovely when somebody says, "Oh, I love that story. I like what you did." That's all cool. But if you're going to ignore the slings and arrows, you sort of have to ignore the rest of it too. Um, so I've always approached it like I'm going to tell the story that I want to tell. I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to write a story that I want to read
Mhm.
because I'm the only person whose tastes I'm 100% sure of. So I do the best job I can. I tell the story that I want to tell within the parameters that the publisher slash editor gives you. Um, and you do the best job, and then you let the chips fall where they may. But by the time the chips do fall, you're 3 stories down the road, and it's I don't think it's terribly healthy to obsess about what reviews say or what the feedback is from the audience. That's not the job. It's adjacent to the job, but it's getting too wrapped up in that stuff is ultimately not healthy. And I don't think it helps you be a better writer. I don't think it helps you be a better creator, because it's just a cacophony, and everybody's opinion is one person's opinion, and um, no more qualified than the next person's opinion. So I frankly, I think the stuff that's the bad reviews and the people who are really upset, I just think it's funny. It's you have to take it all with a grain of salt.
Yeah, yeah. No, I say that because I've interviewed other folks, and I won't name any names, but some people won't even go to cons anymore because maybe they wrote a story that a lot of people don't like, and they get harassed about it. And I just feel like there's got to be a line where you can't cross as a fan. Like we are all passionate about these characters. We grew up with these characters, just like you. I mean, with Robert E. Howard and everything else that you read, we love these characters, but you got to be careful that we're not crossing a line. Again, this is all make believe, and these are, I'm got to be careful that we don't get too wrapped up in what we're reading to where it comes to that point where you're burning someone's picture, which happened this last year. I just think, wow, that's like a level of ridiculousness that definitely crosses a line.
Yeah, we for Green Lantern, we certainly, we got different. copies of the books back torn into pieces, and you open the envelope and the pieces would flutter out like confetti. And I think my editor was the guy who said, "Well, there's another sold copy." It was like thanks for the sale.
Yeah.
Yeah, very rarely have I had bad interactions at conventions because nobody's, keyboard warriors are brave. Um, Nobody's that brave
Yeah.
in person. And the vast, vast majority of people are lovely. That's a big part of why I do conventions is because you get to have FaceTime and you get to have an actual connection and conversation with people who otherwise, are supporting your career, and have hopefully been touched by the work that you're doing, but are otherwise faceless. I mean, for the most part, you don't interact with those people. So
Yeah.
the chance to do that in person, I think, is awesome. And once in a while, you get somebody who's a little stroppy, and I had one guy who was a really big Green Lantern fan years ago and was, you know, really kind of lectured me about what I had done to Hal Jordan. And when he got done, I said, "You realize Hal Jordan's not a real person, right? He's just like made up. He's not an actual person. However, I am a real person,
Yeah.
and this job is how I feed my family."
Yeah.
And the guy kind of stopped, and it was like I had thrown a bucket of cold water on him. And
Light bulb went
it
on.
had obviously never occurred to him
Yeah.
that you're more interested in what happens to a fake person than you are in what happens to a real person. Um, and I understand why that happened. I understand
Yeah.
the how that mindset trickles in. But I guess once in a while people need a reminder of, hey, we just made this stuff up.
Yeah.
It's just make believe. It's just shadow puppets.
Yeah.
So if you like it, great. And if you don't, I guess go find something that you do like, because there's no sense in devoting your time and energy and money to something that pisses you off.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. I think that could be really helpful, Ron, for other younger writers that are probably going through some of those things. And like you said, the world is a little different now because the feedback you get is immediate because of social media. So I think that could be really helpful. All right. Oh, go ahead, please.
I was gonna say, I
Yeah.
mean,
No,
I
please.
do end up talking to some, r- generally writers, but sometimes artists, who are a generation or two behind me, and they come to me and go, "Well, you dealt with all that Green Lantern bullshit. What what did you?" And there's there's really no other answer than, "Well, fuck them." It's just it's you can't get too wrapped up in it. It's easy for me to say, "Well, just ignore it. Just
Yeah.
don't get wrapped up in it." Um, like I said, there's no good answer to it,
Yeah.
but the best answer, if you can get there, is just ignore it, man. Just let it go.
Yeah.
Um, do your job, because ultimately the job that you're doing is the one that all of the people who are complaining about
Hmm.
you would crawl over broken glass to get. So don't ever forget that you're getting a chance to do something that very, very few people do.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I mean, no offense by this, Ron, but before we were recording, we were both talking about baseball. You're a Mets fan. I'm an Angels fan. Do you think being fans of those teams make us a little bit more strong to deal with those kind of things because of all
I
the
guess. I mean,
crap we go through as a fans of these two teams?
we've we've suffered. We've
Yeah.
certainly suffered. We have our crosses to bear.
Yeah, absolutely.
At least,
Yeah.
at least I see some light at the end of the tunnel. For you
Yeah,
guys, I don't know.
the
Um,
door is shut. I don't think there's an end to my tunnel at this point.
well, but in some ways, yes. We were talking about, how today is, as we're doing this, today's opening day,
Yeah.
and today sort of marks the first day of 6 months, more than 6 months, of almost a daily interaction with this thing that we love.
Yeah.
For me, it's Mets games. For you, it's Angels games, and anybody else, just games in general. And I think you have to enjoy the journey of it, because only one team feels good at the end of the season. Unfortunately, that's the Dodgers lately, so
Yeah.
hopefully we'll do something about that. Um, but uh, the journey is what the important part is, not the conclusion per se. Um, so I feel like there's a lesson there in, the making of what I get to do for a career. The making of it to me is much more important than, the reaction to it
Yeah.
when it comes out. If I'm happy with it, if I'm satisfied with it, that's ultimately what my goal is for me to make something that I'm happy with and proud of.
Mm.
And if everybody else likes it, that's awesome. And if nobody else likes it, okay. But at least I did.
Yeah. Yeah. No wrong with the history that you have and the amount of, and you probably get asked this all the time, so I apologize, but with all the different characters that you touched, is there anything that you haven't touched that you would still like to tap into, like a character or a title, or you're pretty happy you've touched almost everything already?
Well, I've been very fortunate to have gotten to play with most of the toys in the toy box.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's an opportunity that you can't even conceive of, even when you start doing it.
Yeah.
So I've gotten to write Batman and Superman and Spider-Man, and um, it's truly a blessing. But there's always stuff that you want to get your hands on, and I think the two that I haven't, I've done some with, which is Tarzan. I've always
Mhm.
loved Tarzan even from a kid. Um, uh, I've been fortunate to write Tarzan on a few occasions in the Burroughs Sunday strip for Korak that I do, and the Batman Tarzan crossover that we did. So Tarzan is still way high on the list, and the other one that I feel like is still out there for me is Star Trek. Um,
Ah,
I have wanted to do a Star Trek original series story, just to scratch that itch, just to say that I got to put my thumbprint on that. So hopefully that can still happen. The vast majority of the other things, The Shadow, John Carter of Mars, Conan, uh, everything at Marvel and DC, I've been able to do that. Even the Phantom, I've written a couple Phantom stories. So I feel like I've ticked most of the boxes on the bucket list,
yeah.
but there are still a couple that are, I'm not giving up yet. So
Still time, Ron, still time. I would love to jump into the real reason why we're here today, and that is an upcoming campaign on Zoop. So Jordan and me are buddies over at Zoop, and so he kind of lets me in on, what's coming up sometimes. And when I saw your name pop up and I saw what you were doing, I thought it was amazing. So if it's okay, Ron, I'm gonna go ahead and actually share my screen and show the Zoop
sure.
campaign. And then maybe we could kind of walk through this together if that's okay. And you could let us know what is being accomplished. This title, I believe you wrote, was it the mid 2000s? Somewhere
Uh,
around
sure, whenever.
2011, 2012, something like that. It was a
Yeah,
five-part
probably,
series, right?
more than 10, 12 years ago was when we started it.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, let's talk about. I mean, this is the Shinku. You wrote this with Lee, incredible artist. Also had so many accomplishments, but we lost him a couple years ago. Very young, 53 years old. When I was kind of going through the history, it kind of touched me a little bit. I'm 50 years old. I'm just like, man, I feel like I have so much life to live, and it's just terrible when someone is gone so young. But out of that situation, it seems like there was some work that was finished but was never utilized for this title. Can you kind of walk through that a little bit for us, Ron?
Sure. I came up with this idea of Shinku is basically a vampire hunting modern day samurai. Um, so it is very violent. It is we didn't pull a lot of punches in terms of language, nudity, violence, because we wanted to do a sort of balls to the wall vampire story. Because at the time that when I had come up with this concept, Twilight was in the movie theaters, and I was just like, well, vampires are all sparkly and romantic. What the hell is that? And if that's your thing, that's fine. Knock yourself out. But it certainly wasn't what I grew up with.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up with uh, Universal horror and Hammer horror films with Christopher Lee as Dracula, and I grew up with vampires as bad guys. So this was an effort to get back to that sort of story, and then meshing it with my ongoing affection for samurai stories and samurai visuals. So I brought it to Lee, and he said, "Sure, let's do this." Image picked it up pretty immediately, and we did 5 issues. Um, and then we sort of lost steam. Uh, the colorist got pulled away to do other projects, and but Lee kept producing pages. So Lee drew almost another 2 issues that would have been issues 6 and 7 of the series. And they never got printed. They never, excuse me, they never made their way out into the world. So when Lee passed away a couple of years ago, um, he didn't have any next of kin. He didn't have any family.
Mhm.
So all of Lee's Shinku original art, as well as original art for other projects we had done together, Dragon Prince for Top Cow, and the Mucker pages for the Edgar Rice Burroughs website. A lot of that stuff came to me in a couple of big FedEx boxes. So, um, and honestly, it sat on my love seat in my office here
Yeah.
for a year before I could really bring myself to sit down and look through it and kind of deal with him being gone and deal with, all right, what do we do with this? So, um, late last year, I came to the conclusion, okay, these pages need to be seen. We need to get them out into the world. So we're going to finish up everything that Lee. We're going to finish up all of Lee's pages, get them inked and colored, lettered, put those pages into the book along with everything else that's been published before. So this is really the complete Lee Motor Shinku. Uh, I wrestled with whether we should finish off the story with other artists and came to the conclusion that I wanted this book to just be Lee's. There will be some pinups and some other pieces by other artists in it, but the story pages are all going to be Lee's. And it ends on a scene. It doesn't really end at the end of an issue.
Mhm.
And I felt like, okay, well maybe that's the way that this should be. It just ends because Lee's not with us anymore, and I didn't want to bastardize this. I mean, maybe sometime down the road there will be more Shinku.
Yeah.
But right now I just want to deal with getting this out, um, doing it in a large hardcover format so that we can really show off Lee's awesome work.
Yeah.
Um, we're also going to be offering a bunch of Shinku original pencil pages from
Oh
Lee.
wow.
Um, Obviously, they're not making any more of those, so
Yeah.
I felt like, and again, I felt like what do I do with all this artwork that was that I inherited basically. Um, and again, that it sat in my office here for quite a while, and I was like, well, what do do I hold on to all this stuff? Do I keep my friend's legacy in, with my arms around it, or I finally decided that the best thing to do was to let those pages go out into the world and let those pages be embraced by people who would love Lee's work and would want a piece of him to remember him by. So there will be original artwork that's part of the campaign, as well as the book that collects everything, the unfinished story pages, sketches, bunch of covers. We probably have another 10 covers that
Oh wow.
were penciled and ready to go that just never got out into the world. So this will be, this will be a monument to Lee in a lot of ways.
That's amazing. Ron, can you, for fans that maybe are not familiar with Lee and a lot of his work, can you kind of give us a little bit of a background of Lee's amazing career, how you two came together, and what he meant to the comic book world?
Sure, he did a huge amount of work especially at DC in the
Hmm.
90s. Legion of Superheroes. He did a Batman Catwoman graphic novel. He did a bunch of stuff on various titles. He also did Star Spangled Kid, and the which was the first work that Jeff Johns ever did at DC.
Oh, Stargirl, yeah, yeah. He was
Stargirl.
a co-creator of Stargirl, yeah.
And so Lee did most of the issues of that series. Um, and his work was just like nobody else's really. He was very, there was a cartoony quality to it, but it was always very much grounded in reality. But just amazing work. The storytelling, the draftsmanship, just superior. And he was kind of an artist. A lot of my artist friends always would like look at Lee's stuff and go, "Oh my God, how does he get so much life into the work? How does he get so much life into his lines?" Um, was just what he did. Um, and he was certainly very humble about it, and he didn't really, he didn't really think of a lot of himself as an artist. He was just a guy that drew pictures. So Lee and I had worked together on a few things, um, kind of leading it to the 2000s or so. And then he kind of dropped out of comics to take care of his father, who had taken ill, and just got out of the business really. And ultimately, once his father had passed away, he was okay. I can draw again. So I tried to drag him back into comics, and that's where Shinku came from. That's where Dragon Prince came from. He did some work at CrossGen. So when he was again available, I tried to make sure that he was a guy that I was always pushing forward for jobs, because he was not, in addition to being very humble about his work, he was not the most proactive guy in seeking out work. He would kind of wait for the phone to ring, and that's really not how the business works anymore. So, so for the latter part of his career, I did most of the work he did was with me.
Yeah.
And I, of course, couldn't have been more thrilled because,
Yeah.
when you get somebody like that to bring your stories to life, it's always better than you pictured in your mind. It's just a blessing to have to be able to pass your script along to somebody that you know is gonna make it sing.
Yeah.
So we just got to be really good friends. He was Uncle Lee to my kids whenever he would visit here, and then the pandemic hit, and he sort of went into went into a funk, and as I guess I did, as all of us did, and
Yeah.
he unfortunately didn't come back out of it. So we lost him about 2 years ago.
Wow.
But this feels like the right thing to do with this work. And Lee left behind a bunch of other work too.
Yeah.
2 dozen sketchbooks and an entire graphic novel of original concepts that
Oh, wow.
um, hopefully we can get out into the market at some point. So there's a lot to his legacy that people haven't seen, and hopefully we can get it in front of the audience.
Yeah, that's incredible. As a writer, having that relationship with your artist is crucial. And I know from a reader standpoint, especially today, because so many artists are global, and a lot of time there's a language barrier, and it doesn't affect comics too often, but sometimes you could tell that the writer and the artist might not be 100% on the same page for a host of reasons. I don't think it's anything negative. I just think that's the world what we're in right now. But when you're a writer and you do have that artist where you just have this understanding, you say you want the character to do this, and the artist just knows exactly what you meant by that, and it comes out in the like, how important is that, Ron, when trying to deliver a story to the fan?
It's huge because it's ultimately working with somebody like Lee.
Hmm.
It's not my story, it's not his story, it's our story, and we're the only two that could produce that story in that fashion. Um, and I think certainly for me, I try to know who I'm writing a script for before I write it. In some instances, that's not possible in the assembly line fashion that especially the larger publishers work at now. Sometimes you're in the position of, well, I don't really know who's going to write this or who's going to draw this, so I don't know exactly how to write this. I don't know exactly what the storytelling should be like. And as a writer in comics, you want to lean into what your artist does. You want to make sure that you're giving your artist um, stuff that they're excited to draw, uh, stuff that they're good at drawing, and that you want to avoid the stuff that is not terribly enticing to them. So um, part of the job is to write to the artist and make sure that they're getting something that they're excited
Yeah.
about. Um, with Lee, with Ron Lim, with Daryl Banks, with so many of the artists that I've worked with, you end up working kind of in shorthand because you're already on the same page.
Yeah.
No pun intended, about being on the same page. You, they know what I'm looking for. I know what they're going to do, and it's really kind of a waltz where you're both doing um, some of the work that the other guy would normally do. You're very simpatico, and when you can do that, I think the book comes out better.
Yeah.
Uh, you get a better finished product at the end of it. It's not
Yeah.
always possible, but when you can, I think that just makes for better comics.
Amazing, Ron. No, that's so well put. Well, I mean, you have Shinku. Looks like it's going to go live. I don't think we have the exact date yet from Jordan, but it's going live in April. And man, if you read Shinku, those first five issues, and you wanted more, I mean, this is your opportunity to get a couple more issues of this story from the same team that put it together. And I think this is an incredible opportunity for people to jump in and to back this campaign, especially, some of that work that Lee was sitting on for a while, and now it's being brought to the fans. And I think I don't know, I feel like that's such an honor to him for those fans to see, some of that work that he left behind with you, Ron. I think that's incredible. What a way to do it.
Yeah, in some ways, this is kind of a last will and testament
Yeah.
from Lee. It's his gift to those of us that are left behind.
Yeah.
And the work is just great work. It's really lovely stuff, and I couldn't stand the thought that that I was going to be the only one that had seen this stuff. I had to share it with the world. So hopefully people will pledge and allow us to get this book out into the world in the fashion that it should be, which is, oversized hardcover, and we're going to try to make it as lavish a book as possible.
I absolutely love that, Ron. Absolutely love that. Well, for everybody that's watching, I'm gonna have the link. I'm gonna make this really easy, Ron, for everybody to get over to Zoop and to like do it right now. And what's great about Zoop is you could go in, just throw in your email address, hit that get notified button, and you'll get sent an email the day that this goes live. And once it goes live, you could go ahead and jump in and you can ensure that you pick whatever desired portion of this book you want, whether it's the hardcover. It sounds like there's going to be a lot of extras that'll be part of this campaign as well, including some of the art pages, which man, I mean that's insane to be able to get one of those art pages in your hand from Lee. I think that would be absolutely fabulous for collectors to jump on. I don't think there's going to be too many of those lying around for people to grab out in the open market. So this is a perfect time to get your copy of Lee's amazing work that he's done.
This is it's bittersweet to be able to put this together. But ultimately really happy that Zoop was willing to jump in and help us with this, and handle all the logistics to make this thing a reality.
Yeah, I mean, I really love Zoop for that purpose. They really take a lot of the frustration out of running a campaign out of the hands of the creators, which allows you to still do what you do for a living without having to worry about, buying Gemini boxes and fulfilling everything in your house and mailing it off. It's quite a pain.
Yeah, I don't. I'm I'm happy to put the stuff together, but man, I don't want to pack boxes if I can help it.
Yeah. Well, that's what Zoop is so amazing. Jordan and the rest of the team over there, they kind of handle all the logistics, which makes it a lot easier for you. And I just I can't wait to get my hands on the complete Shinku myself. I will definitely be pledging to get my copy. I can't wait to see what those last two chapters look like. But what an incredible campaign, and we're going to push this as hard as we can on our side, Ron, and we'll try and get some of the community to push it out there as well. I think this is an awesome way to honor an incredible artist in the industry that has done a lot for fans over the years. So if you want to get your hands on these secret two issues, man, this is the place to do it, and I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot else to add. I'm anxious to get this going because I'm anxious for people to see these pages. Um, I'm sure there were a lot of people that felt like once Lee was gone, there weren't going to be more pages, but he left behind such a wealth of material. Like I said, there are 2 dozen sketchbooks that are just filled with amazing looking work and amazing concepts. Lee was an idea machine as well. So hopefully we'll be able to get a few of these projects out there and into people's hands so that they have so that they can put some more Lee on the shelf.
I love it. I love it. Well, Ron, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you hanging out with me today. It's such an honor to meet you. Like I said, I feel like I know you because I've been reading your comics for so long, but to be able to meet you face to face, to enjoy and relate to some of the pain from a baseball standpoint with you, and then obviously to be able to talk about a title that is honoring the great Lee Moder, which I think that is absolutely fabulous, and I'm glad that you're sharing it with fans and not just keeping it on the seat in your office there. I think that's amazing.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate the time. I appreciate the push that you're giving this, and this has been a pleasure. Other than my Mets, which are on the screen next to me, losing 3-0 in the top of the ninth. It's been a
Oh,
pretty good day.
yeah, yeah. Well, I know all about that as an Angels fan. That's like every game for me. So at least you have a pretty good team. I think you'll be okay.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Well, Ron, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. I hope we could do this again. But it has been a great honor to be able to speak with you, and I wish you the very best Friday coming up and a great weekend and so forth.
My pleasure. Thanks, man.
All right, Ron. Have a good one, okay?
See ya.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.